Hello and welcome to the CX Files podcast. I'm your host, Mark Hillary. Matt Sims is the founding director of 4t4Consult, based in the UK. Until last year, Matt was the CEO of Teleperformance in the UK and South Africa. So he's perfectly placed to give a view on what's happening to the CX industry today, as someone who's now an observer and advisor to the industry, but was until last year a senior executive in possibly the largest CX company in the world. In the podcast, Matt gives a very thoughtful assessment of the challenges of switching to a work-from-home strategy overnight, and where does the industry go from here? Where is the new normal? Where are we going to go in future? Okay, Matt. Well, currently you're an advisor to people across the CX industry, but previously, you were the chief executive of Teleperformance UK and South Africa, so you must know what the challenges are of trying to switch your strategy to work at home overnight, because this is what everybody in the industry has been trying to do. So how difficult would that be?
Hi, Mark. Yeah, I think it's a great question to start with. And I think from the outside looking in now, so to speak, as an advisor, rather than somebody who's running a large contact center, people-focused organization, for me, what has been expressed and shown by a number of organizations, regardless of size and scale, is the absolute flexibility and adaptability that the contact center market has had to show and has shown in great swathes over the last few weeks. We, of course, live in really crazy times right now, a lot of uncertainty going on, and organizations, not just contact center, but I know we're focusing on that today, so that's what we'll talk to, but they've all had to adapt. They've had to change their operating model. They've had to adjust the way that they deliver their services back to the end user, which of course is the customer, people like you and I buying product and service. And of course, in consideration there is the actual client themselves, the actual organizations that the contact centers from an outsourcing perspective are working with. So, hats off to the industry, really. The adversity, the challenge that's been presented by COVID-19, I think, has created a huge, mostly created a spirit of camaraderie and a spirit of getting things done. And over 25 years of working in outsourcing, that spirit of positivity is one that I'm very used to. So, congratulations to organisations that have managed to adjust, managed to continue providing services, particularly in the essential employee space where they're providing services back to vulnerable people across the world. I think, Mark, let's be honest, work at home is not a new phenomenon. It's been kicking around the industry now for around 10 years. And I think the positives that we can take from the way that the industry has adjusted over the last few weeks equally presents similar amounts of challenge to the industry as we go forward. And I'll give you my view on the forward thinking in a few minutes' time. But as I said, work at home is not new to anybody. There's been a huge amount of opportunity for organisations to ensure that they have robust and resilient business continuity plans centred around people working in diverse locations, people working from home, people that are not office-based and office-centric. I think from a senior and middle management perspective, work at home is not anything new. However, when you look at the frontline operational environment in a contact center world, working from home is incredibly new across most of the world. And I know that there are pockets of work at home around the world. US, for example, is a lot more mature in terms of its adoption of it than the UK market, as an example. But organizations haven't had the opportunity to set up scale work at home environments. And it's the rapid nature of the adoption of work at home for me that I think is going to create the biggest challenge to organizations over the next three to 4 months. I think as I talk to people over the last few weeks and listen to what's happened across the industry, I read what organizations are doing. I have to think about the people who are involved in the frontline delivery of the services. Not only are they being asked to continue to provide services in a very difficult time, they're being asked to either go into the office or were going into the office, but they're now being asked to go and work in a completely alien environment to themselves. And that alien environment, ironically, is their own homes in most cases. And I think organisations that are considering the impact on the people involved in delivering work at home solutions are the people that have an opportunity to make some of this stick, i.e. to continue to providing work at home services on behalf of organisations that they support going forward. I've spent a lot of time talking to people about the mental health of individuals working in a work at home environment and the alien nature of that for them. Not only have we been asking large organisations to adapt their operating model, we're now asking people to adapt the way that they work, the way that they measure themselves, and also, of course, the way that they get managed. Quite a lot of people who work in contact centre environments are used to having people around them 24/7 in the operational environment. They're used to having their management teams on hand. So culturally, this is a very, very big shift for them. The practical implications of working from home, I think, are also a challenge for people as well. I'm sure, like me, you've seen some of the images that people have been posting across social media, the professional social media, I hasten, where they're taking screenshots, where they're on a team call and there'll be 15 different people, all with their images on the video call on their screen. And you look around some of those images and you see people sat in their beds. You see people sat in kitchens, you see people sat in their lounges. All of that says to me that people are not geared up from a practical perspective to provide work at home solutions. I think that's going to prove to be a big challenge to people going forward. And leading into that is of course, the regulatory environment. The UK, the rest of the world has just gone through the biggest security implementation of policy and procedure that I can certainly remember. And of course, I'm talking about GDPR. GDPR it caused huge amounts of uncertainty and unease in the marketplace. Again, not just contact centre, but across business, across the world. And what GDPR meant is that organisations invested time in people, time and process, and they also invested a huge amount of money locking down systems, improving process, implementing different teams in their organisations to help manage GDPR. One of the key reasons, in my opinion, why people haven't been, or companies haven't looked at the work at home model is because they have fear. They have fear around data, they have fear around security, they have fear around people's motivations and intentions. GDPR and the ICO only exacerbate those fears. And yet overnight, we've got organisations that have transferred tens of thousands of people from an office environment that was considered secure, considered locked down from a data protection perspective, and asked those people to go and work from a home environment. Those home environments haven't been vetted, they haven't been screened. And it's an unfortunate fact in life that not everybody is as honest as we would like them to be. So I do fear that the regulatory environment is going to be challenged over the next couple of months. And it'll be interesting to see what happens in relation to data security, data theft. I did hear from an industry expert a couple of days ago, actually, who works in cybersecurity, that's talking about the fact that large gangs are now being set up trying to infiltrate people's homes by collecting their IP addresses. So rather than trying to get through into companies to collect data, they're now trying to collect data through individual home IP addresses. And there's some scary stuff out there, and uncertainty is certainly going to set in as soon as something starts to go public in relation to some data theft. So organisations are going to have to do something about that very, very quickly. Culture and management, Mark, I think is key here as well. We're asking people on a frontline basis to go and work from a home environment, and you could argue that it's just the environment that's creating a difference for these people. However, there is an element here that we have to consider around the management of those people, and moreover, the managers of those people are also not used to working in a work-at-home environment. So unless you're an organisation that has been set up specifically to be a work-at-home organisation, then you have to doubt the fact that these companies are really set up culturally to manage these people. You know, if you're a Sensei, if you're an Arise, if you're a 5CA, for example, then that is the backbone. It is the DNA of your business. They have the processes, they have the procedures, and they hire people on a work-at-home basis. So culturally, you know, we have to get managers on board quickly. We have to train people how to remotely manage individuals. It's not easy. It's a tricky thing to do. We talked or joked at the outset of this call before we started recording around the fact that, you know, everybody now is connecting over the telephone using the internet for Skype calls, for team calls, for Zoom calls, for example. I don't think I've had a 100% successful call over any of those platforms over the last 3 weeks where video was held up for the entire time. So we have to think about the infrastructure as well. The infrastructure piped into people's homes. Is it capable of doing what it needs to do? Is it going to stand up to the scrutiny around data protection? Is it going to stand up to the scrutiny of speed required to deliver the services that your employer expects it to? You know, when your kids when they stop working, doing their schoolwork at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and they start logging in and online gaming, and you're expected to carry on doing your job, is that going to be practical? Is it realistic? I really don't know. And lastly, Mark, just in terms of challenges, you know, you have to think about the customer impact here as well. And our customers actually getting what they need from a work-at-home environment as well. You know, we've got essential services versus non-essential services going as a requirement now for continuation of business in a contact center space. You've also got the onshore versus the offshore environment, and survival versus non-survival. You know, customers are being impacted because they can't communicate in the same way with organizations anymore. They can't visit, they can't do the things that they want to do in a home environment. And, you know, it's a silly example, but over the last couple of weeks, you know, there have been organizations, the DIY and hardware and garden centers, have been trying to find practical ways in order to communicate with their customers and remain trading. And I guess you could call it freakonomics to some extent, but, you know, the coronavirus is going to create a huge amount of gardeners in the UK over the next couple of months, because people are doing things around the home that they weren't doing and wouldn't have been doing over the last couple of weeks just because they're locked into that space. So as consumers, I think, you know, we have to make sure that we're addressing the need and the capability of serving those people in a realistic and timely way, in a way that makes them feel good about themselves as well.
Yeah, and you've talked there to issues of culture and how companies are having to change overnight, and potential problems with regulators. But given that we're seeing this kind of overnight change, are there any positives that the industry can take from this?
Yeah, absolutely, Mark. I think the positives kind of fits into the futures bucket for me in terms of the way I've been thinking about work at home in general. I think, you know, the what happens next question is really, really key. I guess rather cynically, I have a view that when the challenge faced in the UK and the rest of the world in relation to COVID-19 starts to die down, that the contact center space is going to see a mass migration back into a brick and mortar environment. And that disappoints me, but I think it's almost certainly going to be the reality. And that's really because of the challenges that I mentioned before, and quite specifically around the fact that companies don't feel comfortable, haven't felt comfortable with the work at home model in certain parts of the world, certainly not at scale, certainly not in relation to regulated activities. So the opportunity exists for organizations to reconsider the way that they are running their target operating model, the way that they manage customer experience, the way that they deliver it geographically, and that's onshore and offshore. I saw again a couple of days ago in one of the national newspapers the challenge faced in India right now with a 1.3 billion lockdown that they're facing. And the fact that that has just created a huge amount of challenge for UK businesses because they simply can't get enough people up and working from a work-at-home environment in India. So what do you do with that volume? Where do you channel it? How as a company do you deliver experience back to your customer and make them feel good about the experience? So target operating model is absolutely key. The smart organizations are going to take this opportunity to strategically think about how they deliver customer experience going forward. And as always, Mark, it's about creating a diversified operating model that accommodates offshore, accommodates onshore, accommodates some work at home. I have no doubt that work at home is going to be more prevalent across the world from a customer service delivery perspective. It has to be because, we've proven it. The industry's proven it. All organizations, or the majority of them delivering customer experience today, have proven that you can do this. Hopefully, fingers crossed, the regulator doesn't have a busy time of it when this starts to die down. I think also key, Mark, is technology. Technology has sometimes been a barrier to target operating models and work at home specifically. Chief risk officers have been a challenge, using technology sometimes as their reason to be a barrier to organizations. But when people, I think, start to take a step back, to start thinking about their proposition to the market, how they deliver services, whether they be in-house operators or outsourcers, when they start to think about how they can diversify and manage volume, manage customer experience going forward, that is going to be the organization or the organizations that are the most successful going forward. In my view, companies already need to start collating teams of people that are away from the day-to-day crisis management of service delivery for the COVID-19 situation. They need to be building a task force of key strategic thinkers within their businesses that are capable of helping them to create that new world, that new target operating model, if you like.
Yeah, and that's interesting. As we come through the immediate crisis and this immediate push to get everybody working at home, what is the new normal going to be? Where are these organizations going to be going to, and how are they going to be operating in future then?
That's the $1 million question, Mark. I think there will be unfortunately huge swathes of people and companies that decide that going back to the traditional brick and mortar model is the right way to go because it gives them the control, it gives them the visibility, it reduces the fear factor from their operating model. But as I mentioned before, I think the sensible organizations will help to shape and create the new norm. I'm not entirely convinced that the new norm is going to come from a large player in the market, although they will, of course, be engaged, involved and significant in the reshaping and the rethinking of what the new norm looks like. But it's going to be the organizations, I think, that have the technology, have the platforms, have the right people thinking in the right way, the people that have the customers as well, the clients that are in an outsourcing perspective that are open-minded and willing to consider, work at home and working with technology to do things differently. And, I think I started to talk about technology and by my own admission got slightly sidetracked, but I think technology has to have a more significant part in the new world. We've been talking about robots and chatbots and automation and data and analytics for far too long as an industry now. And organizations just haven't got their act together in terms of, wholesale industry scale capability in taking transactional and commodity engagement away from customer experience. I think the organization, again, that starts to think about technology in that way and starts to really build solutions, platforms and an operating model that has technology engaged in it in a much more significant way is going to be the organization that comes out on top here. We've been talking about 20, 30, 40, 50% of transactional volumes been taken away by technology and automation over at least the last 3 years, and it simply isn't happening. And it's not happening because perhaps the technology wasn't mature enough, but it's getting there now. It's significantly better than it was. People weren't adopting it. People were fearful of it. People couldn't demonstrate the return on investment or at least the reduced cost for delivery of it. So it's going to take, more agile thinking, more creative, more flexible thinking for organizations to try and come up with an operating model that, contains everything that we know about today and we continually talk about, but is able to create, deploy and deliver in a way that, perhaps we haven't experienced before. More onus on technology, more onus on operating model, work at home and offshore, onshore balance, etc. But I do want to make sure, Mark, that the point around people is really, really out there. And geographic diversity, technology capability, they're all really important, significantly important in everything that happens in contact center and customer experience. But first and foremost, we have to remember the people involved. The organization that comes out with the right culture, the organization that comes out with the right way of managing people, the organization that comes out with, creating environments, creating well-being programs for people in a work-at-home environment going forward, stand a much better chance of making these things stick. I have this real fear in my head that as this Corona challenge starts to reduce and companies start to move volumes back in-house to brick and mortar environments, that they're going to start seeing, a complete reverse in psychology from people who are fearful of going to work at home, who then become real fans of working from home because, why not? It's freedom, it's more relaxed, you still get the job done, but it's just different. But those people are then going to be asked to really take a paradigm shift again and go and work back in an environment that they might not want to go and work in. So again, organizations have to think about the people, have to think about the impact that reversal in environment is going to happen. Is going to take place. Otherwise, no doubt they're going to start to see attrition, absence, and an employee dissatisfaction. So just to reiterate, people are key. People have to be at the heart of this, and wrapped around that is an ecosystem of capability and service.
Thanks for listening to the CX Files podcast. Please take a moment to review the podcast because this helps other listeners to find it. And if you have any suggestions, then get in touch with me on Twitter or LinkedIn. I'm @Mark Hillary with 2 L's, or just search Google for Mark Hillary.